What term describes the practice of thinking about the diagnosis more than the person? All right, just over half of you guys got it right. So look at the question. What term describes the practice of thinking about the diagnosis more than the person? I think those of y'all that put the other three answers might have sort of flipped that question in your head. So this is an indicator you guys might need to slow down and make sure you're reading and understanding the question, because the answer is reductionistic. Here we go. Number 2, what term refers to the familiar things a person does every day that relate to a role that they fulfill? Okay, so let's look at this. The correct response is occupation. So it's really important that you guys get in your head at this point how to explain occupation. Familiar things that somebody does every day that relates to a role they fulfill. Occupation has meaning to that specific person because it relates to that role. So an ADL is part of that, but not all of it. So this is one of those questions that there is a most correct answer and there's a almost or kind of correct answer, and you have to really filter that out. True or false? The philosophy of the OT profession includes the belief that humans are active beings. Y'all are quick on this one. Yay, everybody got it. So if you can envision that tree that you guys kind of sketched out and that we looked at last class, that was one of the things in the roots. We believe that part of how people develop their identity and feel valued and develop their self-esteem and self-worth is through being active. So that's true. Good. Who's the mom of OT? Here comes her picture. Here we go. Eleanor Clark Slagle. So most people got that. Here we go. True or false? William Rush Dunton, the father of OT, was an occupational therapist specializing in brain injury. Okay, so let's look at this. This is a graduate level true or false question. So there are multiple parts in here that could be false or and so one could be, is William Rush Dunton the father of OT? And yes, he is. What's not true here is he wasn't an OT. right? If you missed that, go back and look at the history of that and look at your notes from last week. So the specializing in brain injury doesn't even matter because he was not an occupational therapist. Go back and look at that if you missed that, so you'll get that solidified in your head. None of the founders, in fact, were OTs because there wasn't an OT profession until they made it that way. In what year was OT founded? (1917). That is correct. So remember, I said that we just recently celebrated our centennial birthday, I guess, or anniversary, either one. We have passed the 100-year mark. What term do OT practitioners use to describe persons for whom they provide services? Everybody got it. Good. We do not say handicapped people. They're not really customers. And you will hear the term patients in some settings, but not all. And so in general, we use the word client. What type of activities being used when an OT has a client use a yardstick to practice casting using a fishing pole? So they're using the yardstick to simulate the fishing. All right. This is from chapter 1, and it's important that you get these down in your head because it will help you understand the philosophy of being occupation centered. So the preparatory activities are things like using heat packs or having somebody do walk on a treadmill for 5 minutes or do stretching activities. They're the warm up. Contrived, which this one is like your simulated or make believe activities. And so if you don't have a fishing pole in your clinic, which you probably won't, you could use a dowel rod or a yardstick or a piece of PVC pipe and have the person practice casting. And then that should translate over later to a real life activity. So that is contrived. Now, there are occupation centered activities, and that's when you're actually doing the thing that the client wants to do. So if you did have a fishing pole in your clinic, or if you or the client brought one in from home and then you use that for your therapy, that would be an occupation centered. Now, aerobic is not even on that list. If you did an aerobic activity, if you had somebody do jumping jacks or something like that, or I said the treadmill or get on the stationary bike, you would do that for just a short period of time as the warm up. So that would be classified as a preparatory activity. What is OT speak for the materials used in a treatment session? Therapeutic media. That is also in chapter 1, and it means if you hear media, remember I said like these days we think of media like social media or, you know, NBC or Fox or CNN. That's what we think of as media. Or you might have a media room in a house that people like watch movies in and that kind of thing. But in this context, and what the term that's been used for a long time in OT is therapeutic media, and it just means the material. So it might be a piece of paper, it might be any of these other three things: board games, arts and crafts, weights, but it might be other things too. So it's an overall category. Just as an aside, when I was in OT school, we actually had a whole course called therapeutic media that I'll talk to y'all more about when we get to talking about activity analysis. Here we go. What term refers to the discipline dedicated to the study of humans as doers or occupational beings? All right, so this is a little bit tricky. So it's a discipline or an arm of science that studies the impact of occupation on humans. So it's a bigger, broader term than occupational therapy, which really looks at how can we use occupation to maintain health, wellness, or restore that in people. Remember, we talked about Betsy Yerxa, and she was really big she was an OT, and she was really big in the field of occupational science. So go back and read that part, or review your notes on that again if you're unsure. Here's our podium. There we go. We got a couple runners up though. Okay. All right, good deal. So that kind of gives you an idea of the kind of question that you will see on the knowledge check that's coming up. That's really, it's just a small quiz. I don't really like using the term quiz because I think it freaks people out, and it's a practice. It's like riding with your training wheels. It is 10 points, and we'll have it on Thursday, but it's 10 out of 1,000. So if you have done the preparatory work for these 4 sessions, if you have kept up and been, listening and taking notes in class, and if you have a good understanding of those OT speak vocab terms and concepts that have been on the note-taking guides, then you will do A-okay on that. So don't worry about it. It's just a little indicator as to, if you're keeping up with what you need to do in this course or not. I have found that that students prefer that. You'll get kind of a taste of how I write test questions, and how what we talk about in class and the preparatory work relates to the learning objectives that are being measured in testing. All right, so here's that tree that we talked about last week. This shows us the philosophy of practice in our profession. It is something that's really important for us to know about, not necessarily the tree, but I mean, you could draw it as a star or an orb with arms coming off of it, or anything like that that you wanted to use to represent. But know that it is that philosophy that allows us to have such a broad and holistic scope of practice there. So The tree roots are really our core values in this profession, and these beliefs inform the profession. They tell new people and people who've been in the field for a long time what it is that we're trying to achieve and what we hold as true and most important in our profession. One of the things that is not in here, but oh, actually it is in here, is adaptation. And that is something that is very big in OT. I've kind of jokingly said this to you guys before, and you will hear the MOT2 say this a lot. But one thing that OT students start thinking and saying that bridges the path into the profession is, we're OTs, we can adapt. That's what we do. So, that involves flexible thinking, versus sort of stagnant or even catastrophic thinking. If you showed up, if we were back on campus and you thought you were going to meet with me in the smart classroom, maybe that was what was on Team Up, and you showed up and there's some other people in that classroom that you don't know and the whole thing is full. They're obviously having a different class in there. You could choose to say, well, I didn't have the right information, I'm just going to go home. Or this program is terrible, the wrong thing was on Team Up, I don't even know why I'm here. You could say those things. Or you could, somebody in the class could text me or email me or call me, or you could, call over in the department and say, we're supposed to meet with her, where do you know where she is? And then we adapt. If it was a surprise to me too, maybe we'll figure out where to go. That actually exact scenario happened to me and the MOT2s. One day we were meeting in a different classroom, and we, I'd been told that it was okay for us to meet there, and some of them showed up early, and there was already a class of med students meeting in there. And so I happened to show up right after, and all of us were just said, okay, we're going to adapt. And we went into a lab, a smaller room, and there weren't even enough chairs for everybody, but some people sat on the floor, and we figured it out and did the best we could. So adapting is what we do as OTs. We do it ourselves, and we help our clients to do it when necessary. Quality of life is another one of those terms that we toss around a lot, but I think sometimes it's good to dig into, what does that really mean? The other reason I bring up that topic is because it really goes along with what we think of as client-centered approach. What I mean by that is the way you approach things is going to be different for every person that you work with. People have, even if their challenges are exactly the same, they're going to have different values, different motivators, different paths that work for them. Some people, you can kind of joke around with them a little more than others. Some people maybe want to stop and pray, or some people want written directions. Some people want you to show them over and over, that kind of thing. So, but quality of life in that same way is different for each of us. What I think of a high quality of life might be different from how you picture quality of life. If we picture ourselves down the road at retirement, so we're not working as OTs anymore, what does our life look like? And what each of us say is probably going to be at least a little bit, and maybe a lot, different. And that relates to quality of life. And think about how each client that you come into contact with, that you have the privilege of working with, is going to have a different idea of that. Some people might have a life-altering illness or injury, so they're going to have to adapt a lot and learn to do things in a different way. And some people are going to have a harder time with that than others. They, a lot of times, are having to re-envision or reinvent what they thought of as a good life or a good quality of life. And part of what we do in OT is because we're good at adapting, is to help them figure out how to adapt. So that's, really kind of part of our philosophy in OT, and it's how we figure out what to do with our clients. And we've mentioned the Centennial Vision, and I want to bring it back up because it's really important. But I'll tell you as an aside, this is Jimmy. He's a flying squirrel that I fostered for about 5 months, one winter, a few years back. He fell out of a nest in a tree of some neighbors of mine that were having some limbs trimmed in their yard. And the mom and the other siblings scampered off, and he didn't. He was kind of dazed. And so they got him, and I ended up taking him in. It was winter and he wasn't ready to be on his own yet. And so I put him in. He loved acorns. And one funny thing about him is you could hand him an acorn and he would take it from you and he would spin it around real fast and look at it. And if it had a little tiny hole in it, which meant a worm was either in it or had been in it, he would hand it back to me. Like, no thanks, I'll take a different one. But if it didn't have a hole, he would, eat it with his little front pointy teeth. We did release him into the woods in the back of our house, and when it was started getting warmer, and he was bigger. And he did come back one time a couple weeks later, and he liked to just sit on my shoulder. And so I was sitting out on my deck, and he came flying down from the trees and came onto the deck and jumped on my shoulder and sat there a couple minutes and then flew off again. So I like to think that I can still see him sometimes really early in the morning. But I put him on here because we're going to talk about the Centennial Vision in a nutshell. Now, the Centennial Vision said, we envision that occupational therapy is a powerful, widely recognized, science-based, evidence-based profession with a global connection and diverse workforce that meets society's occupational needs. And remember, I said progress was made in this. It was really not put onto paper until 2007. And because it was a Centennial Vision, the deadline for it was 2017. So that year came and went, and we realized that it wasn't really accomplished. So we needed to adapt and change it up a little bit so that it was extended, but it still kind of circled back to those things that we needed to continue to work on. And where that led us was Vision 2025. Now, I want to show you, this is something that happened at the very beginning of 2017 that was part of how OT is really trying to put ourselves out there on a more global basis. So this is from the Rose Bowl parade in Los Angeles. It's the OT Centennial Float. Everything on there is made of flowers. All right, that house that you saw in there is a house called the Hull House that is in Chicago, and that's where they had that very first meeting in 1917. So I thought that was a kind of cool thing, that it took a lot of effort and a lot of people working together to get that done. So with the Centennial Vision being really established as a roadmap for our profession, once we were in 2017, we realized we needed to extend and really kind of deepen that. And so the update, the one we're working under now, is Vision 2025. And what they did in 2014 was the AOTA, our national professional organization, surveyed 60,000 members and asked them, what are the biggest issues in our profession? What do you think are the goals for our profession? And they put all that wording together so that they could come up with a restated vision. Now, let's talk about a professional vision in general. Many professions have, and a lot of companies and departments and programs, have a vision. And really that just means it's something that a group of people see as a goal for the future, for themselves. So it can be a profession, an organization, a business, a group, etc. It typically is developed from input from members and sometimes other people too, other stakeholders. And it helps us to see what's on the horizon. Where are we going with this? And that's what happened in the development of Vision 2025. Some of the principles, and I talked about this last time, but I want to go back into it. Some of the principles that are really big in our profession today, and these are really touched on in the Vision 2025, and they're also kind of OT speak type of terms, are client-centered practice. Really, that means that we tailor each interaction and intervention to the specific person, what's important to them, what they want to get out of it, as well as what their strengths and motivators and things like that are. So I want you to be able to explain this term and the next one we're going to talk about in your own words. So don't just quote what you get out of the book or what I say. I want you to really understand that. Being client-centered is focusing on the individual rather than being cookie cutter or textbook in your approach. The next one, if we move across, is occupation-centered practice. This is another one I really want you to be able to explain in your own words. And that means it really also will help you explain what OT is. OT always centers what we do on occupation. So being client-centered, we're going to learn about the occupations of each client that we work with, and then we're going to focus our work with that person on their occupations. And that's what being occupation-centered really is. Though we may still do things like exercise, therapeutic exercise, and things like that, we're always moving towards occupation. Evidence-based practice, we talked about that some last week, and you guys will learn about this a lot in the 3 EBP courses that you will take with Dr. Mitchell. But that's just saying that we don't just make up or pull out of thin air our evaluation techniques, our intervention techniques. We do it based on evidence. And we value science as well as the art in our profession. And the last one we're going to talk about a good bit next session and in some subsequent sessions, but it is culturally relevant practice. So that is valuing the background and the culture that your client comes from and relates to. So we're going to go into that more deeply on Thursday. Some of the guideposts that are really hammered out in the Vision 2025 are, we want it to be accessible. And by that, really, if you kind of widen your lens a little bit, you can think about that. That means that people who need our services, people who need OT services, number one, have heard of OT and have an accurate understanding of what OT is. and number two, are able to get those services. And there's a couple of sub points under that. One being, is there an OT with an opening for services in their area? And number two is, can they afford it? So do they have healthcare insurance, or is there some other way that they can access those services? You could see where if we flip that on its head and said, imagine someone who, let's say, has had a hip replacement, and they are doing well in their recovery in the hospital. And so they decide, and their medical team decides to discharge them to home. Now, maybe they've never heard of OT, or the only thing they've ever heard about OT is that they work with kids in the school system. So they don't know that there's a service out there that is evidence-based, and research has shown that it helps people get back to their functional level or maximize their independence safely and efficiently. They don't know. So that would be one barrier that relates to accessibility. Another one might be that they do know about it, but there isn't, maybe they live in a rural area and there's no home health agency or outpatient clinic that can get to them or has an opening. So they can't access the services. Or maybe there are openings, but they cost money and they're not cheap. And maybe the person's healthcare insurance doesn't cover, or they have a large copay so that every time they work with the OT, it costs them $30 as their copay. And maybe, if they're would be getting services 2 or 3 times a week, in a couple weeks, that bill starts to add up. Hard to afford. So that's what accessible means. It involves, in doing better in that, with that guidepost, involves advocacy, education, letting people know what OT really does, making sure there are enough OTs, even in rural or more remote areas, and then lobbying and working with our legislatures and our third-party payers to advocate and educate them about the importance of that funding and reimbursement for those services. So it sounds like a simple, basic, straightforward guidepost, but there's a lot to it. Now, collaborative really relates back to being client-centered and culturally relevant in our approach. That's something that is sort of it's a strength of OTs. I was going to say it's kind of the secret sauce or the magic potion of OTs. But it's not magic, or it's not really a secret. It's something that OT practitioners are known to be really good at in general. And when I say collaborative, do mean collaborating with our clients or prospective clients, but also their support system, being their friends and family and other professionals that are working with them. So we want to kind of close the loop, or make sure that everybody's on the same page and not be siloed in our approach. We don't want to just do our thing and we have no idea what the other disciplines or other healthcare professionals on the team are doing. That would not be collaborative. We also are collaborative with each other in that if I discover that something worked better than the way I had been doing it, I'm going to work to get that into a research study or get it published so that other practitioners know that we're building evidence towards something that's more effective. And speaking of effective, we always want to be evidence-based, and you're going to learn really what that means. A lot of people think that means the same thing as research, and it's kind of one part of research. Sometimes there isn't evidence out there about a certain treatment, or the evidence that's out there is very minimal. Actually, that's true a lot of times in OT. And what we know works for a treatment for a client might not have a research study on it. So part of what you learn as OT students is how you can change that, how you can impact the profession and be a leader and a change agent in our profession by contributing to that evidence. Even if that's just writing up a report or sharing it with somebody about your outcome working with one certain client. Sometimes it's just a single case study, and that's, a step in the right direction. We want to make that larger and more encompassing, but that's a step in the right direction. So to be effective, we have to base what we do on evidence and be consistent in that. We also want to be cost effective. And so we want to be good communicators, and we want to be collaborative with our clients and their support system so that they are following through with what we're recommending. Some of y'all that have worked in rehab settings before probably aware of home exercise programs, or sometimes they're just called home programs. And we will make recommendations for things that extend what we do in the clinic so that people can get better faster. We also will make safety recommendations, and that can not only serve to help people get better, but it can be preventative. It can keep somebody from getting injured and hurt in a different way or more drastically. Last but not least is leaders. We really want to be leaders. And I think that sometimes when OT students hear this, they may think, I'm not really somebody who wants to stand up on a stage and give a speech, or I don't want to run for office. So I'm not really a leader. And that's not actually true. One thing I love about the OT profession is that we're all sort of what I think of more as renegades. We tend to be the kind of group of people, or the kind of people who root for the underdog, who look for alternative ways of getting things done so that more people are included and more ideas are considered, and new ideas enter the picture. And that is being a leader. So that's why in our program, one of the outcome goals, one of the goals we have for you guys as OT students is to be a leader / change agent. So if you don't see yourself as a leader, start thinking of what a leader is as a change agent, somebody who brings about change in one or more people or situations. And that is a leader. So all of us are trailblazers to a certain extent. While we do want to be in line with what the evidence is and be collaborative, and we want to be on the up and up and not just making things up as we go, we do want to be change agents, advocates. We want to be allies and help serve the underserved and people who really need our help. We may need to figure out alternative ways, such as writing a grant or approaching the head of the rehab department where you work and saying, I know this person's coverage doesn't include OT, and they, it's not in their budget, but they really do need the services. Could I do something pro bono and not charge them? Or could we look at a sliding scale and just let them pay what they can afford? Something like that. Or maybe, that isn't possible, but you're going to really develop and somebody just has enough coverage in their insurance for one session with you. It's just the evaluation, and that's all there is. So what you're going to want to do is really big time recommendations attached to that evaluation, and meet with the person to go over those and make sure they are clear and understand what they need to do, since you're not going to be able to see them regularly. And doing something like that is being a leader and a change agent. All right. So also in the Vision 2025 are these sort of calls for what we're trying to do. We want to always keep building the capacity of the potential of this profession. And One thing I'm going to start talking about starting in the next session is something called emerging areas of practice. And that really falls under this strategic direction. Those are things in the OT profession that are newer and less developed and less researched, but that doesn't mean they're not a great and worthwhile area to work in. And I'll give you some examples of that next class, and we'll talk about those. And I bet there'll be at least one of those that will really catch your attention, that you'll be interested in learning more about as we go. Another thing that we want to do to build the capacity of our profession is to make our profession more diverse. Talked about that a little bit in our first class session, and we're going to talk about that more on Thursday. One thing that we know from research is that a lot of the more diverse a profession is, or a group or a business or company, the better equipped they are to serve clientele or customers who have a diverse background or who come from different life situations. And so that's why we want to be more diverse in our profession. We want to be able to demonstrate and articulate the value of OT. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But that's why I harp on the elevator speech and saying things like, understand how to explain these terms in your own words. Don't just memorize it and regurgitate it. Really understand it and demonstrate that understanding by being able to explain it to another person. Being inclusive, and that kind of relates back to the diversity thing I was talking about, and then linking education, research, and practice, and that goes back to the evidence-based practice that I mentioned before. All right, here is a quote. You guys have seen and probably heard this before. OT practitioners ask, what matters to you, not what's the matter with you. And we're going to talk about, let's take about a 5 or 6 minute break, because this is a good stopping point. And we come back, we're going to talk about something that is a big phrase and kind of a buzz term in our profession, but I really like it because it helps to shape our advocacy and leader change agent work, and even our work with individual clients. And that is the distinct value of OT. We're going to talk about that when we come back. So let's come back at 5 till 11. Okay, everybody, welcome back. All right, I started the recording again. Sometimes I forget to do that after a break. Okay, so let me stop sharing this, and I'm going to go to our video. So what I want you guys to do for this video is to I'm making sure I'm on the right thing. Actually, let's go back to, I'm going to show you video about the distinct value of OT, and then I'm going to have you do an activity. So pay attention to this. Here it comes. Well, actually, all right, let's adapt a second. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you, as you watch this video, to think about, it's gonna show some different people in cartoon form that have different roles, and they have different occupations that are related to those. So I want you to think about each person, what their identity is. So somebody's gonna say, like, I'm a gardener. And so that's their role, and their occupation would be gardening. So I want you to kind of think about that and maybe jot down some notes for yourself as we watch. This is 3 minutes long. So let's watch this and think about role and occupation.
We all have life goals, things we need and want to do. Sometimes things get in the way of our goals. Life events can make our goals seem impossible.
I love gardening, but it's difficult because I have arthritis.
I want to drive my car, but I couldn't after my stroke. I need to find a job, but it's been challenging since being diagnosed with schizophrenia.
I want to make new friends, but it's hard because I have autism.
I need to get dressed in the morning, but I just had a hip replacement and can't bend forward.
I have difficulty managing my responsibilities because of my anxiety disorder.
I haven't been able to ride my bicycle since I had a brain injury.
I need to do my grocery shopping, but it's difficult to remember when I have dementia.
It's tough to care for my baby because of my carpal tunnel syndrome.
I need to walk my dog, but I have multiple sclerosis.
I want to learn the guitar, but my right arm is amputated.
I had a spinal cord injury, but I want to live on my own. My occupational therapist helped me to achieve this goal.
Occupational therapists help people to find the tools and strategies they need to overcome barriers such as illness and disability and reach their goals.
Now I live on my own.
I'm learning the guitar.
I can walk my dog.
I can care for my baby again.
I am able to do my grocery shopping on my own.
I can ride my new special bike.
I am working on managing my responsibilities.
Now I can dress myself.
I'm making new friends.
I'm working with my OT to find the right job for me. My OT helped me to drive again.
I have a garden now.
Because of occupational therapy,
All right. So here's what I want to do. I want you to give me just a one word reaction, something that a word that came into your head as you watched that video. And I'm going to count to 3 and everybody type it in the chat, please. 1, 2, 3. Validating, remarkable. That's too funny. I'm laughing at the wows. That's funny. Confidence, empowered, inspirational, love, hype, able, adapting, goals, hope, heartwarming, hopeful, adapt. That's a word that came to my mind was adaptation. And I see some of that, but lots of positive stuff. Thankful, patience, hope, precious. Okay, so here's what I want you to think about in your head. I want you to think about what their roles were. And a lot of times it'll be really basic, like child or homemaker or parent. And then what the barriers were that they talked about to that, and what their occupations are too. So that's something to think about when you come across. This is going to be kind of similar to what you do when you are meeting a client. So to help you do that and to really help you break down the distinction between role, occupation, activity, and task, I want you to go in today's course content. And if you get in today's folder and look at, so session 4, and you should see a worksheet You don't have to print this out. I really just kind of want you to see, it'll download. If you click on it, it should download somewhere on your device. But really what I want you to do is you can just look at it and sketch it out on something. It really is to help you in your thought process. So that worksheet looks like this. And I want to, let's just choose. So let's say the lady that said, I want to work in my garden, but I can't because I have arthritis. Okay, so her goal, if you're going to, sorry, her role, if you're going to put that in the top box, is gardener. That's what role she's wanting to fulfill there. It's not her only role, but that's the one we're talking about right now. So a lot of times when you have a role, there'll be at least one occupation, but a lot of times there'll be more than one. So what for that lady, if you're envisioning her as a real person, anybody want to come out with an idea of what her occupation related to being a gardener might be? And remember, an occupation is almost always going to end with ing. Okay, I've got, thank you. I know a lot of times it's, weeding. Okay, gardening, weeding, good. Planting, good job. Gold star for you guys. I thought I might just get crickets from y'all. Okay, so these are things that are a big part of the role of a gardener. So you could put in gardening. You could put in some other things too. But for our purposes, let's say we put in gardening. Now let's break down gardening into activities. What does it take to garden, to be someone who is gardening? And some of y'all mentioned these as occupations, and you could put it in there, but if it's not necessarily the motivator for her, if she just wants to do it because she has a pretty garden, she wants to, planting, digging, even shopping for seeds, watering, weeding, those things that are little pieces, they're more kind of maybe not as much fun, but just a little part of what she's doing in her gardening. Those are activities. Okay, so if we had gardener as the role, and then we have gardening as an occupation, then maybe as an activity, we're going to have weeding and watering the garden. Just an example. Now let's think about tasks. A task is the smallest element of an activity. So it's just a small component of that. So for weeding, let's think of let's say the physical movements that are involved in weeding. You're going to have to, if you go to pull a weed, kind of everybody sort of pantomime that. So you're thinking about those movements. You're going to have to reach. You're going to have to grab or grasp and pull. Pretty much. Those are the physical components. If we think about the cognitive components, you're going to have to be able to recognize what's a weed and what's not a weed, and then determine what to pull up or what to leave. You might also have to, watch the time. Maybe you only have 2 or 3 hours for the gardening, or if you're doing it in an OT session, you might just have 30 minutes or an hour. So you might have to watch the time. You might also think about the visual components, the sensory components of that. And those are all tasks that are part of the activities that build up to the occupation that support the role. So you see how that is. I'm doing this with my hands because normally when I do this lecture in the classroom, we're in a classroom that is like one of those stadium seating classrooms, so that you guys are on rows that go down and then I'm at the bottom. And when I talk about this, I'll usually go stand on the top stair and I say, this is like represents the role. So let's talk about the role of parenting. One of the people in here talked about caring for her baby. So if the role is parent, we could easily figure out that the occupation that it relates to is going to be parenting. Or you could say mothering or fathering, that sort of thing. Now, an activity that goes along with the occupation of parenting might be changing a diaper. It might also be feeding the baby. You can think of a bunch of others, but we'll just use those two as an example. So a task that goes along with those activities might be, think about the physical components, the cognitive, the visual, the sensory, the endurance with that. So changing a diaper, what movements are, or little pieces of that. So that might be putting the tape tabs or the these days they have closing the Velcro tabs on the diaper. I can't fit all this in the task triangle there. It might be picking up the baby and putting them on the changing table or the bed or the surface, and watching them so they're not going to roll over. It might be remembering the steps of the process. So that's more the cognitive component. It might be understanding how to work a diaper genie, or knowing what's the front of the diaper and what's the back of the diaper, because in case you don't know, it does matter. So you see how those are the little small tiny pieces. Think of them as like the bites of something that if you're going to eat, if you have a meal and the meal is more like the occupation, and the corn, the meatloaf, and the mashed potatoes are each the activity, the medium-sized components, and then taking a bite of those things. Each bite is the task. That's just a metaphor, but so I want you to kind of start thinking about things, a role that you have and an occupation, one or two occupations that go along with that role, and then one or two activities that are needed to do each of those occupations, and then one or two tasks that are needed for each of those activities. And that's how we do things in OT. All right, so that's the purpose of that video. Now I have a little fun thing I'm going to show y'all here. I'm pulling up the wrong. Okay. So I want to see if you are on this game show, how would you do?
Welcome aboard and good luck to you. Here we go. What are the categories in the first round today? They are the Civil War years, followed by We're Gonna Moon You, notice moon in quotation marks. Next, in honor of Occupational Therapy Month, a whole category on that subject. That's followed by nicknames, body, and soul. Michael, off you go.
Occupational for 2.
Dr. Adolf Meyer developed the big 4 of OT around the idea of needing to balance play, rest, sleep, and this 4-letter word. Carrie.
What is work?
Work is right.
OT for 400.
OTs are expert makers and utilizers of these rigid supports used to immobilize or brace a limb. Max.
What are splints?
That's it.
600.
Mountain climbing again, thanks to OT. Aaron Ralston had his survival story told in this 2010 James Franco film. Max.
What is 127 hours?
Correct.
800.
OTs help people with dressing, bathing, feeding, and other ADLs, short for activities of this. Carrie.
What are daily life?
Yes.
OT for 1,000.
Nearly 1/3 of OTs work with children, often on the kids' cacography. Bad this skill. An unusual word, cacography, bad handwriting. All right, Carrie close to the lead, but not quite there. Max moved up nicely to 3,200. He will go first, of course, in Double Jeopardy.
All right. So I just thought that was a little something that was kind of fun. Let's go back to our slides here. Uh-oh. Hate when that happens. All right, now let's go back to our slide. So we've talked about the distinct role of OT. With that, I'm going to actually show you one more video that talks about the distinct role of OT, because that's something after today's class session that I really want you to be more comfortable with what the meaning of that is. So let's watch this. It's 3 minutes long. All right, so a couple things I want to say about that. One is that, so you guys know that AOTA is our professional organization that is on a national level. Now, every state also has an association. I'm trying to multitask here. It seems like I'm losing my train of thought, but really I'm just multitasking. So every state has an association for their OTs. In Tennessee, ours is TNOTA, or the Tennessee Occupational Therapy Association. Now, back when I was a new practitioner in the state of Tennessee, it was just called TOTA, and I actually need to find out the history on this. Somewhere along the way, Tennessee, I guess, duked it out with Texas for that acronym, and somehow Texas won, I guess, because they're bigger. Their state organization for OTs is called TOTA. That's Texas. Ours is TNOTA. So if you're ever looking for that, it's tnota.org is the website. And we're going to talk more about this in Thursday's class, I think, either Thursday or next week, the different levels. But what I'm really getting to is then every OT program has a student OT association, and we call that SOTA, SOTA. So that is made up of OT students, and it's at an OT school. So our SOTA is actually meeting today from 12:15 to 1. You guys, even though you're not official SOTA members yet, you are invited to attend. It'll be actually on this same Zoom room, so you could log off and then log back on, or just stay on if you wanted to attend. You will get to know more about things going on in the program. And at the end of SOTA meetings, I typically make any announcements or things that I know about. And then I have kind of a creative activity that people can do. And so I encourage you to attend. You also will find out about how to become a member, and membership is required of every OT student in SOTA as well as TNOTA and AOTA. And you're going to hear more about that in your leadership class. So that's one big thing I wanted to say about that. The other thing I wanted to say from that video is I want to go into just a little bit more about what the distinct value of OT is. What does that mean? And so that means, what does OT do that sets it apart from other related professions? And this is something I want you always to think about, even on an individual level. So when a client comes to you and you're doing the evaluation and figuring out what their challenges are and why they need OT services and what you're going to really focus on, you need to be thinking about what OT can do for this person that other related professions wouldn't do. So you all know that there is an overlap with the OT profession with other professions, including speech therapy and social work and nursing and PT and so on, psychology and so on. And to me, OT is really kind of like the center. It's like the sun or the center of the flower. And then those other professions are kind of, overlap some, but there's still that distinct value. There are things that sometimes more than one profession might do, but there's always something unique and special about OT. And many times what the answer is the way we approach things. And that goes back to being client-centered and occupation-centered. So always we want to look at things individually and recognize that every person we come into contact with is unique and has things that maybe quirks, but also preferences and different values that are unique to them. And so that's being client-centered. And then always everything we do has to relate back to occupation. So I would never want to see you guys write a goal for a client that is something like this. The client will walk 16 feet using a walker. If you write that goal, here's what I'm going to say. So what? So what? What does that link to? We need an occupation there. So you could write that goal, but then you're going to finish it in order to complete homemaking responsibilities or something like that, or to check the mail, or to walk their dog, or to go out to the garden if they're a gardener. Always want to link what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're writing, and what you're doing with each client to occupation. And that's our distinct value. And this might be something that's really interesting to you all. I know it's very validating to me to know that there are a number of research studies that show when you use occupation, or they might term it functional activity, as an intervention with a client, the outcomes are better, meaning they make more progress and or they make faster progress than if you just use straight exercise. So there is definitely a distinct value of OT. We just need to get that word out even more and really solidify the understanding of that in the general population and even in other healthcare professionals. So we need to get clear on that ourselves. And that's why I challenge you and encourage you to always think about the distinct value of OT. Now, in a couple more courses from now that a class you're going to take with me is called Neurological Aspects of Occupational Performance, and we just call it Neuro Aspects. You will take that from July to September with me, and we'll talk about different diagnoses that fall under the neuro category that we commonly see as OT practitioners. So this would be things like brain injuries, strokes, aneurysms, brain tumors, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Huntington's, all those types of things. We'll go through those conditions one by one, but as we learn about what are the symptoms, how does somebody get diagnosed with that, what are the challenges, and then what evaluations and sometimes interventions or equipment we might use with those clients, always be thinking in the back of your mind, what is the distinct value of OT in working with somebody with this condition? What can OT do for somebody in that category that another profession would not do? So always be thinking about that, and it'll help you with your elevator speech and with marketing and advocacy, and even with your critical or clinical reasoning, thinking about what am I going to do with this client and why is that important? Why is it worth the client's time and money to work with you doing that? All right, so let's go to the last slide, and I have a little closing activity for you guys. This is the question I want to pose is, what does it take to be an effective OT practitioner? What do you think, what qualities and skills do you think, based on your knowledge to date, make up a good OT? So what I want you to do is, somewhere on a piece of paper, I want you to draw a body outline. And it doesn't have to look, exactly like this, but I always kind of think about on a crime scene, if somebody's laid out in the street, the way the police would make an outline with chalk around them. And so that's what, you can do it very kind of stick figure-ish. It's okay if it looks like a first grader, because that's a lot of times what my drawings look like. But then fill in that body at least 15 and see if you can get up to 20 characteristics, traits, skills that it takes to be a good OT. And I'm going to be quiet for 3 or 4 minutes and let y'all work on that. Okay, let's go with what you guys have so far, and then you can continue working on this. I'll give you a little heads up though. About a year and a half from now, in one of the very last courses that you'll take, and the fourth one that you'll take with me, which is Leadership Development 2. It's sort of the bookend of what the class you're taking now with Dr. Zachary. So we have Leadership 1 and then Leadership 2 that kick off and then end the program. I'm going to give you this body outline activity again and ask you to do the same thing. And then I'm going to ask you to pull this one out and compare it. So hold on to this one, tuck it away somewhere or take a picture of it, or you're going to need to access it again in about a year and a half. If we were meeting in person, I would hand out this body outline and get y'all to do this and then take it up. But I'll let you guys kind of keep up with it somehow, and then you can compare it and look back and see how what you think right now compares to what you think when you've been through all your courses. So what I want you to do, this will be our closing activity for the session. I want everybody, when I count to 3, to type in the chat one quality or skill that you put in your body outline. 1, 2, 3. Encourager, empathy, problem solving. I have heard OTs described by somebody in another profession before as professional problem solvers. Curious, gentle, creative, motivating, empathetic, enthusiasm, altruistic. Very good. Versatile, adaptable, motivated, humility, compassionate, patience. You guys came up with a lot of different ones and very good. One I want to mention, creative. Sometimes I hear OT students say, I'm so not creative. I'm not a creative person. And here's something I want to point out to you about that. I believe that everybody has some kind of creativity within them. Certainly OT students, or I don't think you would be here. Now, I do think that sometimes we're so busy that our creativity sort of goes underground, or we kind of put it in a closet for a little bit. And I also believe that there are many, many different forms of creativity. It doesn't have to be that you are a painter or an artist. Your creativity can come from the way you interact with people, or public speaking, or decorating your home, or it definitely can be writing. And something we're going to do in the SOTA towards the end of the SOTA meeting today is I have kind of a writing activity that you can polish up your creativity if you come to that session. So if you are thinking that you're not creative, I bet that's going to change in the next year and a half, if not sooner. Just know that there's probably something that's there that you just aren't recognizing as being creative. Okay, that's all I had for you guys today. Do y'all have any questions or comments or announcements or jokes that you want to share? Well, I'll tell you one funny thing, and so we can end on a positive note. In my family, we like bird feeders, and I guess my kids kind of got that from me. And we call the birds that come and eat at your bird feeders customers. And just while we were on a break a minute ago, my older daughter, who I gave her a bird feeder that suction cups to her window for Christmas, and I guess she has it set up, and she just texted me and said, I'm getting an incredible amount of customers today. And it took me a second to think, what? She's not in sales. Why is she saying that? And I realized, oh, the bird feeder. So she said she had to wait until they noticed it because it's up against the house, but she's getting a lot of bird customers to her bird feeder. So, All right, that's all I've got today. I hope to see you guys at the SOTA meeting. If not, I will see you, or whether I see you then or not, I will see you on Thursday in class. Let me know if you need me for anything. Take care of yourselves and have a good rest of the day.
Hey, Dr. Lancaster, can I ask you a question real fast?
Yes, certainly. Yes.
Okay, this has nothing to do with your class, but you probably know the answer. So on Team Up,